Valentine's Day has arrived once again, and with it comes countless declarations of love, passionate letters, sparkling gifts, rosy bouquets, romantic meals and many other displays of fidelity and selflessness, inspired by this warm feeling of affection, this passionate infatuation that is so characteristic of our species. And what better way to celebrate it but with what one of the most cynical, sarcastic and skeptical film directors that has ever lived said about love? In many of Ingmar Bergman's films, it's clear that there is no particular fondness for love, at least not the idealistic and sappy love that most people conceive of, the sentimental and silly expression of passion that, for example, undergirds the interminable list of mediocre book publications, constantly churned up by less than remarkable authors and which easily attain bestseller status by appealing to the emotional unfulfillment and substandard literary tolerance through the lowest common denominator. But there's also a bitter antagonism towards higher conceptions of love, often displayed in ruthless metaphorical eviscerations of its characters, to the point of evoking the doubt in the audience on whether there is anything real about it, anything remotely resembling love at all in our world. Had Ingmar Bergman always been like that since youth? Did he really believe in and mean all those jibes and harsh tirades against love? Or was he just bitter and resentful of the failure of his earlier, multiple failed relationships? This short essay will attempt to bring some clarity in regards to one of the Swedish master's great adversaries and a recurring subject in all of his films, which will hopefully put his filmography and legacy into a clearer light. Bergman had a complex relationship with love, always disparaging of its deceitful character, suspicious of the intentions arising within those wholly taken by its ravishing grip. A curiosity naturally awakens and seeks to understand the source for such gloomy outlook on what is taken by most to be the supreme goal of life. On his autobiographical memoirs, The Magic Lantern, he confesses to his adoration of love scenes in movies as a young prepubescent man that regularly attended the cinema with his grandmother, and he expresses a heartfelt loving affection for his mother too, which he sadly had not been given the opportunity to manifest, recalling that he never had the chance to throw off the mask and allow myself to be enveloped in a love that was reciprocated. In addition to that, at one point he describes himself as a useless lover, an even worse dancer, and a conversationalist that ceaselessly talked about himself, whilst also sharing that despite having been encased in a wealth of love in my childhood, I had forgotten what it tasted like. I did not feel love for anyone or anything, least of all for myself, which allows one to wonder on the Swedish director's possible causes for his uncharitable perspective on love.
Han och jag älskar varandra, nästan som på lek. Titta nu, du blir i ansiktet. Försök att le. Där ja, nu ler du.
Det gör så ont.
Du som är professor emeritus borde väl veta varför det gör ont. Men det vet du inte. För trots att du vet så mycket så vet du egentligen ingenting.
Despite having addressed his problematic exchange with love on earlier films, in one of his first masterworks, Wild Strawberries, the intrinsically hurtful nature of love is pointed out in a simple exercise between Isaac and his love from youth, Sarah. While attempting to smile in his enamored state, he experiences a pain that is symbiotically tied to it, almost as if saying that the two feelings are mutually inclusive. Despite being a distinguished academician with scholarly knowledge and eminence, his lack of experience in the field of love is revealed in the surprising encounter of pain amidst the joy. Also in The Magic Lantern, Bergman tells us how, meeting one of his earlier crushes as a young man, he had explained to her that he didn't believe in eternal love, that human love was egoism, as Strindberg had laid down in The Pelican, all whilst maintaining that love between man and woman was mostly lechery, a view that is framed in a superb dialogue on the other masterpiece released on the same year of Wild Strawberries, The Seventh Seal.
Jag kanske älskar den.
Du kanske älskar den. Då ska jag tala om för dig, din stackars förvirrade fläsklägg, att kärlek det är ett annat ord för lusta plus en förbannad massa bedrägeri, lögn, falskhet och allmänt lurendrejeri.
Ja, men det gör ont i alla fall.
Ja, naturligtvis. Kärleken är den svartaste av alla pester. Man dog och det var någon glädje med kärleken. Den går nästan alltid över.
Nej, min går inte över.
Jo, och då, din också. Det är bara några stackars fårskallar då och då som dör av kärlek.
In this character's opinion, quite certainly reflecting Bergman's own. Love brings with it nothing but lust, betrayal, deceit and madness, all seemingly arising from it and turning it into a truly repulsive abomination, and therefore only a buffoon would give up his life for it. Chamfort, in his famed book The Cynic's Breviary, says that love as it exists in society is nothing more than the exchange of two fancies and the contact of two epidermises, thereby exposing its vulgar conception as a sham, a facade for something quite different. Indeed, society tends to frame love as a sort of panacea, but more often than not, it seems like it inevitably awakens some of the darkest shades of our nature, acquiring therefore the semblance of a scourge for humanity. In another of his memoirs called Images, focused mainly on his film career, Bergman expresses the thought that true suffering comes from knowing the commandment of love and seeing how human beings betray themselves and each other when it comes to love, how they defile love. The inference one may indulge in here is that perhaps it is not love that in itself is as pernicious as we characterize it, but that we besmirch ourselves in our relationship with it, that we unwittingly debase ourselves by submitting to it in an unbridled, meek and ridiculous fashion perhaps. Is then, for example, the total surrendering of one's autonomy and will to that emotion one of the defining aspects begetting the unfavorable light cast upon it by Bergman? In Winter Light, this thesis seems to find some grounding.
Jag älskar dig. Jag lever för dig. Ta mig och använd mig. Innanför all falsk stolthet och spelad självständighet har jag bara en önskan. Att få leva för någon. Det blir hemskt svårt. När jag tänker efter så begriper jag inte hur det här ska gå till. Kanske det är fel alltihop.
The last sentence from the monologue seems to provide a particularly meaningful hint. Despite the temptation of relinquishing one's independence and volition for the sake of another subject that will take the reins of its life, there's a certain element of irrationality to it, and love is certainly no stranger when it comes to aberrant behavior. Rochefoucauld had written in his wonderful Maxims more than 3 centuries ago that all the passions cause us to make mistakes, but love is responsible for the silliest ones. Surrendering oneself to another is a challenging and terrifying option that does little in terms of diffusing the unsettling suspicion that it might be all for naught, a quick fix of temporary nature for the lingering sense of emptiness that stems perhaps from the person's own feeling of purposelessness amidst the world. Hence why the boiling, lustful drive in love seems so seductive, for it signifies the ecstatic pleasure it brings with itself, even if alarmingly fleeting, but also the fact that for many individuals there lies somewhere perhaps the promise of alleviation for the ennui that pervades every aspect of their aimless lives. A Lesson in Love, despite its caustic and sophisticated comedic strain, offers plentiful insight into this possibility through its subtle sarcasm and acerbic dialogues, delivered nonchalantly with much forthrightness.
Jag föredrar mitt eget enkla liv med alla dess små förtretligheter och glädjeämnen. Jag föredrar de framställda tofflorna och den vänligt likgiltiga brasan framför din parfymerade kropp. En helt annan slags brasa som är mycket, mycket farlig och som far fram över allt det som man kallar hem, barn, omsorg och anständighet och som leder till absolut ingenting. Gå nu, Susanne. Gå nu. Lämna mig i fred.
Du älskar mig?
Nej, jag älskar dig inte. Jag vill ta i dig, hålla dig fast. Låta din eld förbränna min egen slöhet och tråkighet. Låta dig flytta ner hela den sophög av grå vardag som samlats över min hjärna. Som jag inte gitt att göra mig av med.
The problem for Bergman is that love not only seems intent in many cases to merely distract one from his angst and existential woes, instead of effectively inspiring and fulfilling one's life in a permanent manner, but in reality its ephemerality is perhaps the most immediate of its possible characterizations, its swift, sudden appearance and equally abrupt vanishing, which in terms of post-coital melancholy has found in Schopenhauer a dire description as the devil's laughter. This sullen impermanence, often impossible to explain through sheer causality, confers a sour taste to its experience, and again, in A Lesson in Love, Bergman puts forth his ruthless indictment of it.
Ibland undrar jag om jag någonsin har älskat dig. Och det är mycket sorgligt.
Älska? Men visst har vi...
Ja, vad är egentligen kärlek förresten? En ansträngande grimas som slutar i en gäspning. Ja. Såna barnungar vi var som trodde att det skulle räcka livet ut.
Det är alla älskande sorgliga erfarenheter, kära Marianne. Den eviga kärlekens omöjlighet.
Severe words, and indeed, in this day of romance, Bergman offers an alternative perspective of this wild, unquenchable fire, a passion that stirs humanity beyond its rational, sober demeanor into a frantic, delirious realm. By excoriating its ludicrous melodramatic fantasies and denouncing the absurd expectations it erects, Bergman confronts love with the ire of a customer who believes he has been deceitfully sold a broken item.
Om allt är ofullkomligt i denna ofullkomliga värld, kärleken mest fullkomlig i sin fullkomliga ofullkomlighet.
He may seem embittered almost to the point of misanthropy, but as Rilke has said in one of his Duino elegies, is there a man who never watched in dread before the lowered curtain of his heart? Perhaps behind these harsh condemnations lies not a rancorous man who takes pleasure in spoiling all that is good and innocent, as it would seem from surface, but instead a man who merely desired to experience the unbesmirched conception most people entertain, hope, and crave for their lives in their pursuit of happiness. Whatever the case, the films of Bergman offer powerful meditations on love and romantic relationships that will prove useful to the infatuated and the heartbroken alike, in the sense that some will thereby be warned by it, while others shall be comforted. To all you cinephiles out there, have a wonderful Valentine's Day.